welcome to China EVs and More, where my co-host Lei Xing and I will go over the week's most important and interesting news coming out of the China EV, AV, and mobility sectors. We will open the room up at around the 40-minute mark to anyone who's keen to ask us any questions. What Lei and I discussed today is based on our opinions and should not be taken as investment advice. If you enjoy this room, please help us get the word out to other enthusiasts. And of course, tune in again next week. My name is Tu Li. I am the managing director at Sino Auto Insights, a Beijing-based consultancy that helps organizations bring innovative and tech-focused products and services to the transportation and mobility sectors. I write a free weekly newsletter that we pull many of our discussion topics from. You can sign up for it at sinoautoinsights.com, which of course I encourage you all to do. A feeling better Lei, can you please introduce yourself?
And good evening and good morning too. I am your co-host Lei Xing, former chief editor of China Auto Review. This is episode number 67, a special Friday evening U.S. time, Saturday morning Beijing time edition. First of all, I truly apologize for asking you to do this episode on a Saturday morning. This was rather a SH start TTY week for me as I've been under the weather, had a fever, so that's why the last minute change in our show this week. But much better today and luckily tested negative for COVID, so thanks for accommodating. It's actually Memorial Day weekend here. Can't believe it's officially summer here. Just filled up gas for my old Buick today, $72.55 for 15 gallons of gas.
Wow.
Painful. And this is the weekend when more Americans are supposed to get on the roads and start traveling for the summer season. But gas prices obviously ain't helping. So much going on this weekend. The Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau, Greater Bay Area Auto Show, or simply known as the Shenzhen Auto Show, is going on. Yes, there is actually an auto show going on in China.
Yes, in person.
In person. So not in Beijing or Shanghai. So maybe we'll talk about it a bit next week. So Top Gun Maverick just got some rave reviews. So I guess I have to see it sometime this weekend. I guess it's not showing in China because what the Tencent backed out of the investment, right? We saw the article.
So originally Tencent had signed on to invest about 12% in the movie's budget. They backed out when they thought it might be too pro-American.
Right.
And so, it's got to be just one of those super entertaining movies that pushes the limits on filming. And there was a really cool piece, a funny piece, and I'll send it to you if you haven't seen it yet, Lei, where Tom Cruise takes James Corden up in a plane. So it's hilarious stuff.
And I'm rooting for my Celtics tonight. So, but
oh man, it's a close game. Game.
Back to the topics. Let's first talk about the stimulus a bit. And
yes,
I'm not talking about stimulus pertaining to the auto industry or the stimulus. I'm talking about the entire economy. So maybe kind of combine that with what's happening on the ground. Maybe you kind of give us some of your perspectives from on the ground.
Yes, I think that we are getting to the point where the entire economy is seized, potentially. And so Li Keqiang had an internal meeting with thousands. Was it thousands?
Tens of thousands, reportedly.
Basically the largest Zoom call ever. But they have this all hands on deck mentality, and there's going to be billions and billions of dollars that will be invested because there's practical reasons, because the economy is in jeopardy of actually shrinking for the first time in a quarter over the last 30 years. And then the drivers of the economy, the ports, the manufacturing, those are really, really slow to get started back up. So part of the strategy to create the stimulus is also June 1st, supposedly, Shanghai is officially going to open back up. Now, it's not a binary thing. Everything's closed and everything's open. It's going to slowly open back up, but we have already seen videos, Lei and I have already seen videos of people out in the streets in Shanghai just kind of celebrating. And, that's good to see. But yeah, I tweeted earlier just now, Lei, that we will need, or Shanghai will need also the people that keep the city running, the taxi drivers, the DD drivers, the servers at restaurants, and the delivery people. They'll all need to come back in order for Shanghai to really, really, really get going. Because if you have workers and then no support staff, then it's just going to prolong the recovery. And so you and I have seen how fast things move in China, but there's this governor on how fast things can move called COVID. And that really hasn't changed. The policies haven't changed. And so there's always going to be a risk, whether it's in Shanghai, Jilin, Shenzhen, anywhere. There's going to be a risk that an outbreak could happen and everything gets shut down again. So it's puzzling to, I think, a lot of Westerners why they're sticking to this policy. And they, a very common refrain I'm hearing is that they had 60 days, Shanghai was shut down. Why didn't they mandate people to get vaccinated? So these are questions that we have as well. But I feel it's going to be a very slow recovery. I think this is going to be a year that scars the Chinese economy a while, not only because it might shrink, but also because all the expats are gone and getting them back is going to be pretty challenging as well.
Yeah, and we've seen the studies or surveys put out by the European Chamber as well as the AmCham, right? We've seen the numbers, but within the last, couple of weeks or so, Premier Li Keqiang, he's held 3 different events or meetings, right? There's that executive meeting where he mentioned, as far as relating to the auto industry, is the 60 billion kind of the stimulus on the purchase tax and the 90 billion car loans that can be kind of delayed, right? The principal and the interest, right?
Yep.
That. And then he held another meeting with these foreign, dignitaries on the CCPIT anniversary. Okay. And the third meeting, which is the one on May 25th, that all hands, it's actually called the National Stabilizing the Broader Economy teleconference, where the full text that's been circulated around is not officially reported. There's only that summary officially reported by the official, channels. And it's, right, the picture, I mean, I don't want to say it's dire, but it's not good.
An indication of how real this is, Lei, is first Volkswagen, Dies saying, we're going to double down in the United States. We're going to increase our investment. We're going to try to double our market share from 5% to 10% in 2030. And then also Hyundai offering up over 10 billion combined in investment by 2025, right? So companies are really making that move, are shifting away. What 5 years ago would have been a no-brainer to invest into China. Now they're looking at other countries, specifically the United States, for these 2 automotive companies. But that should give you an indication, a broader indication that, yes, foreign companies do see, despite all the immediate challenges that we had, including that tragedy, this amazingly sad tragedy this week in the United States, they feel it's more stable and they feel more economic opportunity for growth in the United States than in China. And so that should really, really point to a lot.
Yeah, I'll tell you, the world is a crazy place right now. And we're, just lucky to be able to, do this, to do our thing here.
Yeah.
And, you put things into perspective. But, the pendulum is definitely swinging as far as investment is concerned. Although we do see these news, let's say CH Auto, eCarX being SPACed in the US, right? Chatter of NIO trying to build in the US. All of these things going on. Some are in the longer horizon. Some are happening or happened already. So, The stimulus, we talked about this the last two episodes, that they were going to come. And so far, I've looked, at some of the numbers. More than, I guess, a couple of dozen provinces and regions have launched their own kind of the stimulus measures on auto sales, not just EV sales, but a lot of the stimulus are pertaining to EVs. So besides the 60 billions, stimulus on purchase tax, so a couple of examples, Shenzhen is giving 10,000 RMB directly on the purchase of EVs. And Shandong province, I tweeted this, they're giving, 3,000 to 6,000 renminbi depending on the price of the vehicle. So these things are happening in larger volumes that, reflects the current state of, production on the one hand is getting back up, but then there's the consumption side of the equation, right? And also,
and we want to be clear about that, Lei, because the first thing, if you're out of a lockdown for 60 days, the first thing that you're thinking about is probably not buying a car. So these stimulus is necessary to get people into the showrooms and looking online and interested in perhaps buying that vehicle, right? And so
we also do get the illusion that what's happening in Shanghai and Beijing, that does not represent China, by the way, right? So there's other parts of the China, major cities. Shenzhen is doing an auto show today, starting today. And other parts of China seem to be relatively more normal. So there's still activity. It's just affecting some brands more than others. And, it's almost June and we're going to hear those May numbers. I am expecting, particularly, let's say for BYD, that it's going to be, again, head and shoulders above everybody else. BYD is not going to do 100,000 units. They're going to do 100,000 units more than everybody else. That's the kind of the numbers we're looking at.
Right.
Based on the current conditions. And we said this, also past few episodes, that it's going to take, you say it's going to take a year for the economy. So I'm saying it's going to take the entire Q2 for the industry to get back to normal, right? So I think May, based on the current numbers, CPCA, it's better than April, but still, it won't get back to normal anytime soon.
And we have to remember how amazing if BYD is able to get to six figures or, over 100,000 units, how amazing it is, because they're threading a needle. If we go to XPeng's earnings earlier this week, they're actually forecasting Q2 to be sales to be about 6% less than Q1 sales. And Q1 sales was already challenging, right? 32.5 thousand units for Q2. So as most other automakers are struggling to keep their factories open, BYD is effectively printing money. So it's an amazing thing. I would love a deeper dive in understanding how they're managing it. Maybe it's just the luck of the draw because their factories, well, number one, they have more control over it. So that's not lucky. That's just part of their strategy. But the other part, it has to be luck, right? A lot of where they're getting the raw materials aren't closed up.
Yeah. Aside from that Changsha factory story that we talked about, it's been pretty much positive every phase of the game. New products, more announcements, right? We can kind of go into BYD a little bit. The high end, the BYD Seal, new technologies, C to B, from C to C to C to P to C to B. All these acronyms. This new kind of the Quattro style technology that they're bringing out, right?
And we need to take a step back too, Lei, because if we think about the timing of this, BYD had perfect timing on all these product launches too, okay? Because as other EV companies are doubling up on launches or not launching anything at all, in Tesla's case, you just see what seemingly every quarter, oh, we're gonna show this vehicle off, we're gonna show the Seal off, we're gonna show the Tong off, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that. And so they've been able to manage new products every quarter. So staying in the news cycle, which is important if you're an automaker. And so it's, again, the quietest EV dominator in the world, but I think more people are starting to see that.
Taylor's teasing us with the BYD Han. But seriously, I think in the Chinese chatter, is BYD ballooning all of a sudden too much, right? The high end going up to that price range. So think of that brand as a tank plus a hi-fi and even higher, or a G-Class plus a hi-fi and even higher. What? $250,000, $1.5 million.
That's aspirational. That's not even luxury. That's rarefied air. So
yeah, and this is coming in the second half soon. Actually, they'll make the announcement.
I love the boldness. I'll always give credit to anyone who wants to push the envelope and push themselves, but can the execution meet the promise? So that's what is. I'm a little bit wondering about, because you're not going to build a $250,000 car on the same line as you're building a Seal, are you?
And the disparities at the same time, they're even coming out with even smaller. There's Ocean series of models, the Seagull, which is smaller than the Dolphin, trying to compete with even the Wuling Hongguang EV segment. And that's the range of vehicles that they have now, from a Seagull to a 1.5 million, whatever that thing will be. And we don't know what the brand is yet, but it's coming.
And we have to remember that these decisions, again, they did not happen in the last 12 months. They have a 5-year product plan that they were probably just tweaking. So these decisions were probably made 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago. And they're looking at this from a timing standpoint as being the right time. Otherwise, they would delay it. So,
yeah, no, I'm just saying that the Seals seem to be hitting also a sweet spot in the market with these latest technologies. So that should be another. The BYD right now is got so many of these star models, right? You name it, Tang, the Han, the Dolphin, the Seal, and then we haven't even talked about the other series yet. The the Frigate, or what's the name?
Oh yeah,
right. Destroyer.
Well, and then yeah, and then they have Denza.
Denza, right? Denza's coming out with more models, and you have this high end. Oh boy, there's.
Maybe we can transition to a quick chat about Jidu.
Yeah, and I think the Jidu, the surprise was, first, Robin made these announcements, and second, that this car is priced in the 200,000 range, which was a lot lower than I expected. What was your reaction?
Yes, he's going right into the meat of the market, right? And so Jidu will be the first vehicle from a technology company. So I don't think that Geely is offering much in the form of software or digital features to the vehicle. So the key points that I wrote down from Robin's conference call was that they're leaning into intelligent, right? It's not about electric, it's about intelligent. And he emphasized that it's going to be so different than everyone else because of its ability and focus on hardware and software integration. And 200,000, if, again, the execution fulfills the promise, they're going to sell a ton of those things.
Yeah, but the other things that I have my skepticism is they keep calling this a robocar, but what exactly is that? Is it the consumer AV that GM's trying to be doing, that Zeekr is trying to do with Mobileye? Or is it something that's going to offer those city level NGP style assisted driving?
Right.
Or is it something else? And pricing at 200,000, I don't know. Is Jidu overpromising? I feel like,
of course they are.
They are.
That's because if we look at the landscape, though, Lei, every other part of the market is occupied. So they have to be even further out. And you're absolutely right. I don't know what an auto robot means. I have no idea what that means. And I'm sure it'll be confusing once we see and touch and feel what they mean by auto robot. So, but it's a technology company building a car. So the way they look at things is going to be completely different from the jump. And I'm hoping that there will be at least a handful of features that are like, wow, that makes a ton of sense. And because Baidu is all about bits and bytes, they can actually execute on that. So,
and it's also supposedly a sedan and competes targeting directly at the Model 3. I mean, with that price range and the autonomous, driving ADAS features. Plus, he also unveiled the second model starting, order in 2023 and deliveries in 2024.
But Raman isn't technically part of management of Jidu, is he?
Not really.
So that was a little bit confusing to me.
I mean, Jidu doesn't have a quarterly earnings call. So, but I mean, you can see that this is very important for Baidu. It's supposed to be Zhou Xia, right? That should be.
Yes. And it's important because Baidu has kind of trailed off from a revenue standpoint and profit standpoint. So they need a different business to help them generate more revenue. So
yeah, definitely. I mean, on these earnings calls, investors are looking for these type of information.
And Baidu is definitely trying to be more friendly to Western media as well. So
sure. So we'll look for it, to it on June 8th when this thing gets revealed and more information is shared. But
the sedan just tells you that they're targeting BYD and XPeng P5. So
I don't know, but also this teleporting lidars that they have on the hood, right? Which is a very interesting design feature. The lidar that pops up and closes down. Right. So that'll be interesting. But yeah.
Want to talk WeRide and Bosch?
Yeah, WeRide and Bosch. I think this is actually the first ever global tier 1 teaming up with a Chinese AV startup first. And second, this is WeRide's official move from L4 focused business to L2 to L3 assisted driver assistance market, which to me shows that either Bosch has to find help, or the other way around, that WeRide sees this lucrative segment of this AV sector, and that's why they teamed up with Bosch. So this is very interesting collaboration.
So Lei, I point back to, here's a shameless plug. We just dropped our 7th episode of China EVs and More Max. This time we have a chat with Omer Khalaf, CEO, co-founder of Innoviz, a LiDAR company. And they had just signed a partnership with Liangdao Intelligence. And in the pod, he specifically said that we can't collect data, so we needed a Chinese partner. And so to me, I feel that Bosch had the same situation. So they use WeRide to be able to be their partner in order to try to generate revenue via the Chinese partner. And so I do also think that Bosch probably reconciled they looked objectively at their strengths and weaknesses and said, you know what, WeRide is much better at X, Y, and Z. And maybe they looked at WeRide because they were the most affordable AV startup, from a valuation standpoint, because Pony, I was reading that Pony is like $9 billion. I have no idea how they're worth $9 billion, but I don't know if WeRide has that level of valuation yet. So maybe that's another reason. But
this is a very good point you're making, because recently, right, Luminar investing into eCar X. That's one kind of sign or example. WeRide working with Bosch, Innoviz working with Liangdao. that they're finding, these foreign companies are finding different ways of moving in or right?
I think that they've gotten to the point where I think the European market, the Chinese market have gotten to the point where, okay, we need to execute. We can't sit on the sidelines anymore and try to figure out how policy is going to be shaped.
But the thing is, though, for Bosch, I mean, Bosch is as a Chinese localized company as you will see in China among all the not only global tier ones, but any global automotive company, right? The CEO of the China business, he posts viral videos. He has his own video channel of what's going on in the lockdown. He recently posted a video of an empty Bosch China headquarters.
Right.
And, he was saying, I wish you guys are all back to work. And people are like, oh, So for them to still work with one of these AV startups is, again, interesting. And again, going back to the Innovis episode, I said in my takeaway that these domestic LiDAR companies are already the Goliaths, whereas these foreign companies are the Davids. And now they must find ways to work together in order to play in the market. That's how it's going to be. And you're going to see more of these, and also more of Chinese working with Chinese companies. So the classic example is Horizon Robotics. And also their competitor, Black Sesame, just teamed up with JAC, right? All of these,
yes,
these different camps happening.
You're going to see a lot more chip design, chip companies from China emerging because there's a lot of investment from the Chinese government, a lot of encouragement to build out that sector here. So we talk about Horizon all the time, and we talk about SMIC, but I don't really know that many others besides Black Sesame. So we'll start hearing more about them, I feel, in 18, 20, 30 months. And so, Taylor, you should probably hear about more of them as well. Once you hit Shenzhen, you'll probably hear about them, these companies that are just starting out, because that's going to be a huge, huge opportunity for Chinese startups to fill a void and mitigate risk effectively for the Chinese government, because they're worried about getting cut off.
And yet, going towards the ECARX news a bit, we're still seeing, right? There was was it Wall Street Journal article about SPACs over the last 2 years not doing well. Quite a majority of them not doing well. And yet you have CH Auto, ECARX. And the interesting thing about ECARX is based in Wuhan. Okay, so Wuhan Geely has several entities in Wuhan, right? The ECARX, Lotus Technology, which is an investor in the IPO or SPAC. And I heard that a daughter of Eric Lee's is a board member on ECARX. And the CEO of ECARX used to be with Patil. And Patil is kind of a competitor, but one of the earliest Chinese companies into this telematics space. And if you remember the history, the founder of WM Motor, Freeman Shen, was also a right. When he was with Patil, they tried to launch a car. I think this was back in 2014 or 15. And so the founder of Patil and Freeman, they had a disagreement. And so he left to start WM Motor, and the CEO of ECARX, Shen Ziyu, he left as well. And then there were some lawsuits that never got anywhere. So Geely sued WM Motor, I believe. So I mean, all this history.
So Geely and WM Motor definitely have a tangled history.
Yeah, Freeman
and
Shen
there are lawsuits in place right now.
Geely, so
yes. And so there are finger pointing, and I heard that Li Shufu or Eric Lee is upset at Freeman about a few different things. So, but I had a few questions about the ECARX, okay, because this is effectively the Cariad of Geely, okay?
Sort of, yeah.
And they were talking about how they already have generated revenues from OEMs, You know what? They've generated revenues from OEMs that Geely owns. So do they have any revenue from an outside OEM? I don't know.
Yeah, here's a point I want to mention because you just talked about this. In the presser, they listed all those brands, including Mercedes-Benz, by the way, Volvo, that they have teamed up with eCarX. But right now, eCarX is only on Geely branded vehicles, okay? Not found on some of the higher other brands. And the other point is Geely has so many, right? Polestar they're preparing for their IPO, right?
Yes.
In the US, third quarter.
I think all IPOs are going to get pushed out. I don't think this is a great environment.
Yeah, they have so many entities that can be, right, that can be listed. It seems that this eCarX is something, first of all, that Eric Lee really likes this guy, the CEO of eCarX. So I think it's pushed to the front a little bit. But the other story is that it's not utilized as widely as they are, reported.
The one thing I will throw out there, Lei, is if Chinese listed companies start getting booted off of US exchanges in early 24, and these two companies successfully IPO in the United States at the end of this year, what's going to happen to them? So this is completely confusing to me. Why they would? It's obviously money grabs, but eCarX is a Chinese company. Full stop. They can say they have foreign customers, but like you said, you pull that veil back, it's just Geely. And if you talk about Lotus, if you talk about Mercedes being these foreign brands, Geely owns 9% of Mercedes, and they completely own Lotus. So it's not really these independent foreign companies that have entrusted eCarX with the infotainment and data services solutions, right? So they did say that there are two OEMs that are looking to utilize eCarX. I don't know who those are, but the key though is that I was told that eCarX and Eric Lee or Li Shufu did get permission from the Chinese government to IPO. So I think one of my questions was, are they doing this like cowboys, like Mavericks, or no? But I was told that he got permission. So
yeah, the timing is definitely a little strange. Both CH Auto and eCarX, and through SPACing, right? Both are through SPACing.
And they didn't know that the economy, inflation, when they started the process months ago, was going to be like this. But I believe Cove, the eCarX SPAC owner, or the SPAC that they're going to merge into, I believe they have about a year to find a partner before they had to give the money back, because you only get 2 years, right? And so maybe it's a desperate move. Who knows, right? But just because you have Luminar as an investor, that doesn't do anything.
And then also remember that the other thread or this lineage is, remember Geely was moving into mobile phones, smartphones. There's some chatter about them buying up some phone brands. All of these is connected.
I think you're going to find that these car companies that want to become consumer products companies, their products are just going to be crap. They're two different things, and to break into a market where Apple dominates on the top end and Xiaomi dominates on the low end is just going to be brutal. It's going to take attention away from their core business, and I get how it makes sense strategically, but it's going to be a painful several years if they try to become this hybrid company that builds cars but also builds mobile phones, right? So
yeah,
if it made sense, BYD would have done it a long time ago, right?
BYD has too much on their hands already. Anyways, even though they're a very steep vertically integrated company, which Geely is trying to become as well. So quickly on this NIO in the US and XPeng earnings, I think kind of compare, earnings I think there were different headlines on the XPeng earnings. Some were about their bigger losses in Q1. I think it was over 1.7 billion
Right.
net loss, and then some chatter about their executives departing. I didn't see what. Did you see any major? Did you watch some of the Brian Gu interviews?
Some of it, yep.
Yeah. What was his? I think the tone is that they're still positive that this that they get. I think one thing that was mentioned on the chips was that there's 5,000 different chips in a car, and the bottlenecks right now are not on the expensive chips, but on the relatively cheap chips. So that was one thing, and the other thing was the P9, which is going to be priced in the 400,000 RMB range.
Right.
The other thing was that they're still way behind, I think, in their margins. I think they're about 10% to 12%. Their goal is 25%. So, and if you compare to NIO, right? NIO is relatively better, although deliveries are not as good. But, right, you balance these out and how you look at these companies.
So there's a couple of different things that I want to talk about really quickly about the XPeng. So on these chips that aren't the high-end chips, what normally happens is that there are customers that might hoard them. Just a basic understanding of how the chip stuff works, and this works for memory too. The high-end stuff, that is going to be much more customized, but the more commoditized chips that Brian Gu is referring to, they can be used on refrigerators, they can be used on PlayStations and vehicles, their control chips and things like that, transistors, resistors. And so what companies do is they want to protect their production, and they'll buy and they'll hoard them. They'll buy 20,000 extra, 30,000 extra, 10, 20, 15% extra chips and hoard them. And then if they don't use them in production, they'll sell them on this gray market. Okay. But the gray market is a complete demand supply thing. And so if there's high demand, low supply, the price could be almost twice as much as you would buy directly from the fab. And so there could be a couple different challenges here. XPeng is buying off the gray market, and that's squeezing their margins, or they're refusing to buy on the gray market, and that's limiting their production a little bit. I don't know which situation is theirs, and I'm speculating that this is happening to a lot of the automakers. But I also want to say that the struggling economy in China and the challenges in the rest of the world, inflation and everything else, Warren Buffett said, when the tide is out, that's when you see who's swimming naked.
Yeah, that's often quoted in China as well.
Yeah, and so
Luo Yong, swimming naked.
Yes, exactly. But what is exposing is how these different strategies that these companies have is affecting their production, their margin, their branding, their positioning. And XPeng is actually taking a beating because, I'm reading that Li Auto and NIO, they have much more control over their retail and channel sales, but XPeng is relying on dealers. And so that's really giving them challenges on the sales side. So, I think XPeng's going to be fine long term, but they got to get past some of this stuff. Because remember, they're only forecasting 32,000 cars being built in Q2. So they don't have to buy that many chips in the grand scheme of things, right?
Yeah. And also proportionally, P7 still account for quite a big portion of their deliveries. If you look at the numbers that they put out, right?
Yes.
So supposedly they have, so mix-wise, they should be getting better, margins. But then again, they talked about some of the stuff offsetting that price mix or product mix.
And remember that they're bringing online their own factory as well. So capital expenditures will be increasing over the last several quarters, likely. So
yeah, and I personally I wouldn't read too much into these executive departures, right? Though it is one on their overseas, so that's kind of interesting. But people come and go, right? The CTO of Li Auto left. I think he joined a
Private equity.
Yeah, PE or
Right.
VC firm, Wankai, right?
Yeah, good for him, man.
Yeah, and and also now you see, right, the other news is NIO is putting these labs on batteries. And reading, I'm reading that build. I can't pronounce that word. Build book by Tony Fadell, and he specifically talked about how Apple.
Oh, you finally got it. You finally got it.
How Apple
Okay.
decided to do their own chips when they cannot rely on Intel anymore because it fluctuates, right? And so this is, interesting that, yeah.
That's my claim to fame, Lei. When I was at Apple, I transitioned the graphics chips from the Freescale Motorola semiconductors to the Intel platform.
Oh, okay.
And so what was happening was Intel's level of innovation was decreasing over several years, right? And so Apple never wants to be beholden to a supplier. They're more extreme about that stuff than any other product company out there.
Right.
And so they're one of the few companies that can actually execute and design and build better, right? So that's one of those things where they transition out of Freescale into Intel, and then they finally are transitioning into their own silicon with the M1 and the M1 Pro, M1 Max processors. So
and and even the modems, right? They're trying to, and this M1 Pro that I have right now is great.
Flies. It flies.
Right.
I told you, man. You transition over to the Mac platform. You're not going to go back.
I think we covered pretty much most of the topics tonight. The U.S., right? NIO is already in the U.S. BYD is in the U.S. To me, these are the two brands that I see launching or make announcement to that effect within the not too distant future in the U.S. So other than that, if we look at what's been happening with investment, whether it's batteries, whether it's building dedicated EV plants, there's a trend going on. There's investment. I can see, all these states, Indiana, right, where the Samsung SDI investment just announced with Stellantis, Georgia with Hyundai, some of these southern states. But when you have this Chinese name, then it feels a little bit different. Okay? But I think you can bet that the conversations are going on, that plans are being made. When and how that happens, that's a different story.
They're looking for their best deal. I will add this to your comment about NIO and BYD. Totally agree. NIO's degree of difficulty is a little more difficult, or is a little bit higher because of the battery swapping. If they truly, truly want to bring that customer-friendly service, then they need partnerships that they're not used to working with on the US side for. And and to piggyback off of your comment, BMW has a factory in Mexico that builds 2 and 3 series. They're likely going to be building EVs in Mexico. So what we'll see is that Canada, United States, and Mexico kind of sort of be the area, the free trade area, where we'll start seeing other announcements from battery cell manufacturers. And that's part of it, right? Because what will happen in the United States in the next 18 months, more battery cell factories going to be opening and more charging infrastructure is going to be popping up, investments and things like that. And so look for those announcements a bit more frequent.
Yeah, as a brand, as a Chinese brand, in order to put a global name onto your brand, being in the US, selling in the US, producing in the US, it's like, right? You can't get any better than that.
Yeah, it's still meaningful,
right? From that point of view. But we also have to go back to this thing that I often say, that the Chinese smart EV startups are not out of the woods by any means. And with the pandemic, with these geopolitical things going on, it's difficult. But you have to push ahead, right? You plan. You already have your plan, especially with NIO, who's announced the most aggressive and the clear global expansion plans that anyone has made, right? The additional markets in Germany, in Europe this year, 25 countries by 25. So then you have to have those materialize, right?
Well, and then BYD this week saying they're going to be in 45 markets in Brazil. So
yeah,
they're pretty aggressive too. That brings us to the end of this week's show. Lei and I thank you for tuning in. My name is Tu Lee, and you can find me on Twitter at Sino Auto Insight. That's SinoAutoInsight. You can find Lei on Twitter at LeiXing77. That's LEIXING77. If you wouldn't mind rating and or reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you grab your podcast from, we'd appreciate that as well. Even better, if you enjoy this show, please tell your friends about it. Please join us again next week as we track down all the latest news on China, EVs, and more.